This is not an earthquake. This is not a storm. This is the ground itself moving. Tonight, breaking out of southern Italy, something deeply unnatural is unfolding beneath Sicily. The land is grinding, the earth is cracking, and entire sections are sliding, slowly, relentlessly toward the sea. There was no warning, no shaking like a typical quake, no violent explosion of force. Instead, residents describe a low, terrifying vibration, as if the planet itself had begun to groan. Within minutes, panic spread. More than 700 people fled in absolute fear, abandoning homes, cars, and entire neighborhoods. Roads split open without mercy. Walls fractured. Power lines snapped as the ground beneath them shifted out of place. Some residents say they could hear the earth moving, a deep grinding sound like stone being crushed beneath unimaginable weight. And then came the most chilling confirmation. Officials monitoring the situation admitted something they rarely say out loud. The movement hasn't stopped. Hour after hour, sensors continued to detect motion. Not inches, not cracks that stabilize, but a slow, continuous slide. The kind that doesn't pause, doesn't rest, and doesn't care who stands in its path. Emergency crews rushed in. Evacuation orders spread rapidly, yet even as people ran, the ground kept shifting beneath their feet. Tonight, Sicily is not facing a single disaster. It is facing a process, one that could accelerate at any moment, and the terrifying truth is this. When land begins to move like this, there is no rewind. It began without warning. No sirens, no emergency alerts, no violent jolt to signal danger. Instead, residents across southern Italy felt something far more disturbing. A deep, unnatural vibration, low and continuous, pulsing beneath their feet. People froze. At first, many thought it was heavy machinery. Others believed it was distant thunder. But within seconds, fear set in. Because the sound didn't fade. It grew. Residents later described it as a slow scream under our feet. Not loud, but relentless, like massive stone grinding against stone, hidden beneath the surface. Windows rattled without shaking. Floors felt alive, and the ground began to move, not violently, but deliberately. Then came confirmation from above. Satellite sensors detected something alarming, a massive ground displacement stretching across wide sections of Sicily. This wasn't a single crack or isolated landslide. The movement spread mile by mile like a slow wave passing through solid earth. Entire sections of land began to slide downward, inch by inch, not collapsing, drifting, and every inch was pulling Sicily closer to the Mediterranean Sea. Roads bent instead of snapping. Buildings leaned as foundations shifted beneath them. Hillsides crept forward, unstoppable and silent. This wasn't sudden destruction. There was no dramatic explosion, no single moment to point to and say, that's when it happened. This was slow terror, the kind that gives you time to realize what's happening, and just enough time to understand that you cannot outrun the ground itself. And as the minutes passed, one truth became impossible to ignore. The earth wasn't done moving. This was the moment fear turned into action. Security cameras captured chaos unfolding in real time. Families abandoning cars in the middle of the road. Doors left wide open. Engines still running. Parents grabbed children without shoes. Neighbors pulled the elderly by the arm. Some didn't even look back. Because beneath their feet, the ground was still moving. Footage shows streets warping slightly, not collapsing, but shifting as if the land itself were alive. The kind of movement that triggers instinct, not logic. Police radios erupted with panic across southern Italy. We can feel it moving. The road is changing shape. We can hear it. Listen. Officers described a deep grinding sound traveling through their boots, up their legs, into their chests. Not loud, not sudden, just constant. Within 4 minutes, entire neighborhoods in Sicily were nearly empty. Homes stood silent, shops left unlocked, pets abandoned as people ran with only what they could carry. Emergency officials later confirmed the scale of the panic. More than 700 people evacuated immediately. Additional evacuations ordered as movement spread. Ground cracks expanding hour by hour, but numbers don't capture the fear. Residents say the most terrifying part wasn't the running. It was stopping. Standing still meant feeling the earth shift beneath you. Hearing stones scrape against stone. realizing the ground you trusted your entire life was no longer solid. And then came the realization that froze emergency crews in place. The movement didn't slow, it didn't pause, it didn't settle. Even as neighborhoods emptied, even as roads were sealed, even as night fell, the ground never stopped moving. And in disasters like this, that single fact changes everything. To understand why this is happening, you have to understand where Sicily sits on the map. And more importantly, what sits beneath it. Sicily lies on one of the most unstable geological zones on Earth. Deep below the surface, two massive tectonic forces are locked in constant conflict. The African plate pushing north and the European plate pushing back. This collision has been happening for millions of years, and it never truly stops. Most people imagine tectonic pressure as something that explodes, a sudden earthquake, a violent jolt, a clear beginning and end. But that's not always how the Earth releases stress. Sometimes it grinds. Instead of snapping, the plates drag against each other, transferring enormous pressure into the land above. The result isn't a sudden collapse, but a slow, creeping movement that can last for hours, days, or even longer. Experts describe it like this. Imagine a heavy table resting on a slightly tilted floor. At first, it doesn't move. Then, almost imperceptibly, it begins to slide. No crash, no warning. Just steady, unstoppable motion. That is what Sicily is facing right now. A massive landmass being quietly pulled out of place by forces far stronger than anything on the surface. And when this kind of movement begins, it's nearly impossible to predict when or where it will finally stop. As the ground continued to shift, scientists monitoring Sicily made a statement that instantly raised global concern. It was brief, carefully worded, and deeply unsettling. This level of continuous ground displacement is extremely unusual. In scientific language, that sentence means one thing: they have never seen this behave like this before. Geologists explained that most ground movements follow a familiar pattern. Pressure builds, a release occurs, the land shifts, then stabilizes. Even major landslides usually reach a breaking point where gravity, friction, and resistance finally balance out. But this time, that balance never came. Instead of slowing, instruments kept recording steady motion. Minute after minute, hour after hour. Sensors buried deep underground showed the same disturbing trend. The land wasn't jerking or collapsing, it was grinding forward, as if locked onto a track it could no longer escape. One expert described it privately as a slow-motion geological failure. The most alarming data came from deformation sensors placed across the region. These instruments suggest the landmass could still drop several more feet if the pressure beneath Sicily continues to migrate. Not suddenly, not violently, but relentlessly, and that's what terrifies scientists the most. Slow movement means time. Time for cracks to widen, time for slopes to destabilize, time for entire sections of land to weaken without anyone realizing just how close they are to failure. Researchers admit the models don't fully explain what's happening. Some forces appear to be interacting in ways that don't follow textbook behavior. In other words, this isn't just another landslide. It's a complex, evolving process. And right now, even the experts are watching with unease. Because when the ground refuses to stop moving, nature is no longer following the rules we understand. If this slow slide accelerates, even slightly, the consequences could be devastating. Emergency planners studying Sicily warn that the margin for error is already thin, and if pressure beneath the island shifts in the wrong direction, everything changes. First, coastal towns. Many communities are built on slopes already weakened by time, erosion, and human development. If the ground suddenly loses stability, entire neighborhoods could collapse toward the shoreline, taking roads, homes, and people with them. Then there is the threat beneath the water. A rapid land movement above ground could trigger underwater landslides along the continental shelf. And in enclosed waters like the Mediterranean Sea, even a localized seabed collapse can displace massive volumes of water. That displacement can generate sudden waves. Not the towering tsunamis seen in the Pacific, but fast destructive surges capable of flooding ports and coastal cities within minutes. Infrastructure faces equally severe danger. Gas pipelines, water mains, power grids, and communication lines are not designed for continuous ground motion. As the land stretches and shifts, these systems can rupture without warning, sparking fires, blackouts, and cascading failures across the region. And then there is the loss that cannot be replaced. Sicily is home to ancient cities, archaeological sites, and historic structures that have survived thousands of years. If the land beneath them gives way, entire chapters of human history could be erased forever. Behind closed doors, emergency planners admit the unthinkable. If the wrong section fails, if the slide reaches a critical point, the sea will rush in. And once water claims unstable land, there is no rebuilding it. The government of Italy officially declared a regional emergency, unlocking special powers and rapid response protocols reserved for the most serious natural threats. Military units were placed on standby, ready to assist with evacuations, logistics, and disaster containment if conditions suddenly worsened. Armored vehicles and transport trucks lined staging areas just outside the danger zone. Major roads leading into unstable regions were shut down without notice. Concrete barriers went up. Access points were sealed, not to control traffic, but to prevent people from returning home. Above the ground, fleets of drones were launched around the clock. Their mission, track cracks spreading across hillsides, roads, and urban edges, sometimes widening by the hour. Live feeds revealed a disturbing reality. What looked stable in the morning often appeared visibly worse by nightfall. Yet despite all this activity, officials avoided one question: how long will this last? Press conferences were brief, statements carefully measured, and when reporters pushed for timelines, answers stopped short. Finally, one spokesperson offered a single sentence: "We are preparing for a long situation." No dates, no projections, no reassurance, just that. For residents, those 6 words landed like a shockwave. A long situation means weeks, or worse. It means uncertainty, displacement, and the possibility that some people may never return to their homes. Emergency shelters began filling. Families asked if it was safe to go back for belongings. Officials said no. Behind the scenes, contingency plans are already being drafted for worst-case scenarios, including expanded evacuations and permanent exclusion zones. Tonight, the government is watching. The military is waiting, the drones are still flying, and the people of Sicily are realizing something terrifying. This is not a short-term crisis. This is a standoff with the ground itself. In towns across Sicily, a small but determined group of residents chose to stay behind, despite the danger beneath their feet. For them, this isn't just land, it's legacy. Many families here have lived on the same ground for hundreds of years. Their homes have survived wars, invasions, volcanic eruptions, and powerful earthquakes. Generations were born in these streets. Generations were buried in this soil. To leave now feels unthinkable. One elderly man standing outside a cracked stone house told reporters quietly, "If the land goes, I go with it." Others echoed the same belief. They've seen disasters come and go. They trust the land more than warnings on a television screen. But rescue teams see something very different. They see unstable slopes, widening fractures, and ground that no longer behaves as solid earth. They know that when slow movement turns fast, there is no time to knock on doors. Emergency crews have been going house to house, pleading with holdouts to leave, not ordering, begging. Because acceleration is the nightmare scenario. When a slide speeds up, it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't give minutes. Sometimes it gives seconds. Once that threshold is crossed, rescue becomes impossible. Vehicles can't reach the area, footpaths vanish, buildings collapse without warning. Officials admit privately that if conditions worsen, those who remain may be beyond help. Tonight, these residents stand at a heartbreaking crossroads between history and survival. Because when the ground finally decides to move faster, there will be no second chance. As scientists continue to monitor Sicily, one message is becoming increasingly clear. This is not just a local crisis, it is a global warning. Experts say what's unfolding here should serve as a wake-up call for coastal regions around the world that sit on unstable ground, places where geology, climate, and human development collide. Across southern Europe, aging infrastructure rests on shifting terrain shaped by centuries of tectonic pressure. In parts of California, entire communities are built along fault lines and eroding cliffs, where slow ground movement often goes unnoticed until it suddenly accelerates. In Japan, one of the most seismically active regions on Earth, steep coastal slopes and underwater trenches create constant landslide risks, both on land and beneath the sea. And in Indonesia, volcanic islands face a dangerous combination of tectonic motion, heavy rainfall, and rising ocean levels that can destabilize entire coastlines. What makes this moment different is the convergence of forces. Climate change is raising sea levels, increasing erosion at the base of coastal slopes. More intense rainfall saturates soil, reducing friction and stability. Meanwhile, tectonic plates continue to push, grind, and strain the land from below. Individually, these risks are manageable. Together, they form a volatile mix. What's happening in Sicily shows how disasters don't always arrive with explosions or shaking ground. Sometimes they arrive slowly, quietly, almost invisibly, until it's too late. Experts warn that other regions may already be experiencing similar movements, just not yet detected. In that sense, Sicily may not be an anomaly. It may be a preview of what other coastlines could soon face. A reminder that the ground beneath us is far less permanent than we believe tonight. Sicily waits. There are no explosions, no sirens screaming through the night. Only the quiet tension of a land that refuses to rest. Sensors buried deep beneath the surface continue to hum, feeding constant data into monitoring stations. Numbers change, lines shift, alerts remain active. Across the region, cracks widen slowly, almost imperceptibly. But enough for engineers to notice that nothing is stabilizing. The ground is still moving, not fast, not violently, but persistently. This is the kind of motion that unnerves even veteran scientists, because it doesn't announce its intentions, it simply continues. Researchers are watching every reading with unease, knowing that once certain thresholds are crossed, there is no reliable way to intervene. No button to press, no mechanism to stop gravity and pressure once they take control. Governments are preparing quietly, emergency plans are being updated, evacuation routes reviewed again and again, resources staged just beyond the danger zone, but preparation has limits. Officials know that if the land suddenly gives way, response times collapse to seconds, and seconds are not enough. And then there are the residents, families sitting in temporary shelters, elderly citizens clutching keys to homes they may never see again, people watching the news praying the ground will finally stop. For now, Sicily exists in a fragile pause, balanced between stability and disaster. Because once the land gives way completely, once gravity wins its final argument, once the slide accelerates beyond control, there will be no warning, no time to run, no chance to recover, and nothing at all will be able to stop it. If this situation escalates, the world will be watching Sicily. Subscribe for real-time updates, turn on notifications. Because this story is not over. It hasn't stopped.